Here are a few interesting quotes which I found in the last week. This evening for these quotes, I'm reading from C.G. Jung, Psychological Reflections. This is a terrific book. It's 300 and almost 400 pages long, and it's edited quotes by Jolande, Jacobi, and R.F.C. Hall. One of the difficulties with Dr. Jung's oeuvre is that he said things all through his oeuvre for a period of nearly 60 years. And so pulling the ones together that have commonality or a common topic was quite a task for the people that were in the second part of his, the second generation apostles. This is the book that I'm reading from, and this is just a terrific book to have by your bedside because it has both short and long quotes, and so it's something that you can read before bedtime. This quote comes from an essay called On the Re-Education of the Germans. This is immediately post-war, and it appears in volume 18 of the collected works. And here's the quote. Childlike faith, when it comes naturally, is certainly a charisma, but when joyful faith and childlike trust are instilled by religious education, they are no charisma but a gift of the ambiguous gods, because they can be manipulated only too easily and with greater effect by other saviors as well. Imagine who the other saviors are. This is from a section of this book entitled The Individual and the Community. Okay. The next quote is from the foreword that Dr. Jung wrote to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it's carried in Collected Works 11. Quote, our blight is ideologies. They are the long-expected Antichrist. Now, as you probably know, Dr. Jung always referred to any ism as the wretched ism, because he thought that they were not good and healthy for humanity. Next quote, and this comes from a foreword to a paper written by Cornelia Brunner for Jung's Institute in Zurich. It's now carried in Collected Work 18, which is entitled The Symbolic Life. So here's the quote. What is the use of technological improvements when mankind must still tremble before those infantile tyrants, ridiculous yet terrible in the style of Hitler? Figures like these owe their power only to the frightening immaturity of the man of today and to his barbarous unconsciousness. Truly, we can no longer afford to underestimate the importance of the psychic factor in world affairs. And one more, which is going to lead me into a longish quote from Mysterium Coniunctionis, is this one. This is from paragraph 783 of Mysterium Coniunctionis, which is volume 14 of the collected works. The wise man who is not heeded is counted a fool, and the fool who proclaims the general folly first and loudest passes for a prophet and Führer. And sometimes it is luckily the other way around as well, or else mankind would long since have perished of stupidity. I think I'll leave it at that for those quotes, but now I thought that I would take this a little bit farther. This this rather weighty tome is Mysterium Coniunctionis, and this was the last major work that Dr. Jung wrote in his lifetime. Okay, so I'm in Mysterium Coniunctionis, and I'm going to start in paragraph 781. He's talking about the transcendent world, the metaphysical world. He says, and I'm starting right in the middle of a paragraph because it gets too long otherwise. It seems to me advisable under these circumstances and in view of the limitations of human knowledge to assume from the start that our metaphysical concepts are simply anthropomorphic images and opinions which express transcendental facts either not at all or only in a very hypothetical manner. Indeed, we know already from the physical world around us that in itself it does not necessarily agree in the least with the world as we perceive it. The physical world and the perceptual world are two very different things. Knowing this, we have no encouragement whatever to think that our metaphysical picture of the world corresponds to the transcendental reality. Moreover, the statements made about the latter are so boundlessly varied that with the best of intentions we cannot know who is right. The denominational religions recognized this long ago, and in consequence, each of them claims that it is the only true one, and on top of this, that it is not merely a human truth, but the truth directly inspired and revealed by God. Every theologian speaks simply of God, by which he intends it to be understood that his God is the God. But one speaks of the paradoxical God of the Old Testament, another of the incarnate God of love, a third of the God who has a heavenly bride, and so on, and each criticizes the other but never himself. Nothing provides a better demonstration of the extreme uncertainty of metaphysical assertions than their diversity, but it would be completely wrong to assume that they are altogether worthless. For in the end, it has to be explained why such assertions are made at all. There must be some reason for this. Somehow, men feel impelled to make transcendental statements. Why this should be so is a matter of dispute. We only know that in genuine cases, it is not a question of arbitrary inventions, but of involuntary numinous experiences, which happen to a man and provide the basis for religious assertions and convictions. Therefore, at the source of the great confessional religions, as well as many smaller mystical movements, we find individual historical personalities whose lives were distinguished by numinous experiences. Numerous investigations of such experiences have convinced me that previously unconscious contents then break through into consciousness and overwhelm it in the same way as do the invasions of the unconscious in pathological cases accessible to psychiatric observation. Even Jesus, according to Mark 3:21, appeared to his followers in that light. And I'll just read the footnote here. The footnote is Mark 3:21. And when his friends heard of it, they went out to lay hold on him, for they said, he is beside himself. The significant difference, however, between merely pathological cases and inspired personalities is that sooner or later the latter find an extensive following and can therefore transmit their effect down the centuries. The fact that the long-lasting effect exerted by the founders of the great religions is due quite as much to their overwhelming spiritual personality, their exemplary life, and their ethical self-commitment does not affect the present discussion. Personality is only one root of success, and there were and always will be genuine religious personalities to whom success is denied. One has only to think of Meister Eckhart, But if they do meet with success, this only proves that the truth they utter hits on a consensus of opinion, that they are talking of something that is, quote, in the air, unquote, and is, quote, spoken from the heart, unquote, for their followers too. This, as we know to our cost, applies to good and evil alike, to the true as well as the untrue. Now, here comes the quote that I read earlier. This is paragraph 783. The wise man who is not heeded is counted a fool, and the fool who proclaims the general folly first and loudest passes for a prophet and Führer, and sometimes it is luckily the other way around as well, or else mankind would long since have perished of stupidity. Paragraph 784. The insane person, whose distinguishing mark is his mental sterility, expresses no truth, not only because he is not a personality, but because he meets with no consensus of opinion. But anyone who does has to that extent expressed the truth. In metaphysical matters, what is authoritative is true. Hence, metaphysical assertions are invariably bound up with an unusually strong claim to recognition and authority, because authority is for them the only possible proof of their truth, and by this proof they stand or fall. All metaphysical claims in this respect inevitably beg the question, as is obvious to any responsible person in the case of the proofs of God. The claim to authority is naturally not in itself sufficient to establish a metaphysical truth. Its authority must also be backed by the equally vehement need of the multitude. As this need always arises from a condition of distress, any attempt at explanation will have to examine the psychic situation of those who allow themselves to be convinced by a metaphysical assertion. It will then turn out that the statements of the inspired personality have made conscious just those images and ideas which compensate the general psychic distress. These images and ideas were not thought up or invented by the inspired personality, but happened to him as experiences, and he became, as it were, their willing or unwilling victim. A will transcending his consciousness seized hold of him, which he was quite unable to resist. Naturally enough, he feels this overwhelming power as divine.